Hello, this is Jon Speelman on a rather hot day in North London, where I've been recording or writing, and I'm now going to record column 149. It's not column 150, I've just corrected that, seemed a bit much. Let me just check that we are recording, and we are. And so I've entitled this A Few Reflections More and a Cocktail of Caissists. I don't think the more probably doesn't need to be, who cares? Right, I suppose the cocktail in that case ought to be a capital C, oughtn't it? Who knows? So I activated my glorious mirror a fortnight ago. It's an imaginary artefact which reflects back the best chess players of all time. And I opened up discussions, and I gave a game by Bobby Fischer and a game by Garry Kasparov. And I should emphasise that the fact there was just one each doesn't mean that I'm saying I'm passing judgment on them, that's just how it started. So there were plenty of comments in the comments section to this thing. Redound is a word I was looking up to check I was using it correctly in here. Where is this gone? Here we go. Here are the comments in that column, which is called Mirror Mirror, and on the wall, and about 30 something comments, which is nice, where people talked about various people who they thought might be the best ever. And so basically I don't have a very strong opinion about this, but there were 4 different groups or camps. People who think Fischer was great, those who advanced the claims of other recent top players, a few shouts for Lasker, Capablanca and Alekhine, and some mentions of the great players of the past who can't be directly compared to the modern crop, but were way ahead of their time, Morphy, Philidor and even El Greco. And then I mentioned that Yasser Sarouan had replied, which is great, my old friend, and his list was Kasparov, Karpov, Fischer, Carlsen, Anand. There we are. And he talked about how tough it was for the other people at the time, like Lajos Portish. And then I mentioned as an aside, I don't want to be rude to Yasser, because we had a candidates match. He generally played some pretty good games against me. He smashed me the last time we played in an Olympiad. Brilliant game. But I did beat him in the candidates in St John, New Brunswick in 1988. And the reason I bring this up is not that, but that I recently had lunch with my son Lawrence, and he was saying he'd been out the night before to some bar and there'd been both beers and cocktails. And I mentioned, had I ever said to him about the cocktails in St John, where they named cocktails after chess players? So I hadn't, to my surprise. I thought I told him most things, most misbehaviour I'd undertaken in my life. And so I couldn't remember the names. I think there might have been a Speelman Surprise or a Benko Bomber. And I asked my second who in St John, Will Watson, he couldn't remember either. I was hoping also, maybe I've got it written down somewhere in my glorious filing system behind me, but that would require an earthquake to move it, let alone to get into it. So I was wondering if Yasser possibly remembers or has a record, or if any readers, viewers here happen to have any information about this. If you do, I would love to know. And Lawrence said he'd make me one if we can find out what they are, which would be very nice. Then I mentioned some epithets. I said that I'd say that Kasparov was or is an uncaged tiger who revels in violent conflict. I tried volcanic energy last time. In the comments, readers suggested brute force, which I think is a bit less subtle than it needs to be. But yeah, I mean, there was. And power and action. And I'd already said that I look at his knight takes g7 game against Predrag Nikolic, and also one of the readers, Meisterzinger, whoever he be, mentioned Topalov, and of course there's a fantastic king hunt. So we're now going to look at those 2 games. They're in this one, and I'm going to be fairly brisk. I picked these up off Megabase, and this one had comments by Murray Chandler, which I've added to as JS. He mentions that Kasparov won the best game prize in the Olympiad, though he was one of the judges, but he should have done anyway. It's a great game. It's a Slav, where Predrag played this move, e5. By the way, if you play pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, you should go here. White should play bishop f4 first, and probably not knight c3 when e5 is annoying. Right, it's just a little bit of theory. Okay, so he went knight c3 and Predrag tried e5 here, takes d4 here, check. Apparently bishop d2 was a novelty, which is very extraordinary. Knight d2 had been played before. Take, knight to there. Kasparov is taking aim. He goes e3 takes. And here he played the very surprising move f takes. And Murray says people watched and thought, what is this guy thinking about? But what he wanted to do was to get his bishop to the long black diagonal as quickly as possible, and he didn't care about his structure. Maybe he thought he could use the e-pawn as a battering ram as well, I don't know. So he took aim. Bishop g4 isn't necessarily the best move, it's certainly not a bad one. And here he made a mistake, Predrag. He needed to play rook fd8, I think. Takes, presumably bishop g7 doesn't work. I'm just wondering about that now. Let me just stick on the great engine. It doesn't even mention bishop g7. Because I think, well, you got knight e3 for one thing, maybe, and then recaptures, and you also just go king takes check, king f8 presumably, and it ain't sound. So that didn't happen, but certainly alleged it ain't sound. What is it saying? Bishop takes, probably knight e3 actually. Knight e3 exclam. Queen c3. Knight takes. Rook takes. Queen f4 check, and it just ain't working. And bishop f6. Okay. And it's all gone wrong. So, just occurred to me why Predrag might have done this, but he took and went rook fe8. Thought, okay, I'll play bishop f8, it'll be okay. But when you got that knight in f5, you do, and the bishop on c3, you do always think about knight g7. And it happens that it works jolly well, so Kasparov did it, of course. Excellent move. Queen f5, knight f8 is a good move. You need to be able to block with the knight on g6. So we got a line that goes rook a d8, check, king f8. Pre-computer gave knight e5, but in fact this doesn't really work, and knight d4 or knight h4 are correct. Knight h4, knight c5, check here, knight to there, knight e6, takes, and basically white's just winning. It's disgusting. I mean, you can't play this position with the knight in f5. You're going to get maimed very soon. So, and that's better than knight e5 as it happens. This happened. h4 was given an exclam at the time, but actually the great and glorious engine gives a really rather fantastic line, which goes knight e5, king back, rook over, king takes, not easy, queen to there. And now it's still not easy, but you play the retreat knight g3. I was looking at knight d6 and things, but you just go back. And you win the pawn back, and you have a much better rook ending. I mean, presumably black will just swap some pieces, play king g8 or something. Probably king g8, and you'll take a few times. I don't know which way you take. Does it matter which way you take? Probably with the knight. Knight takes, bishop takes. Bishop takes, rook takes, and this should be winning. Plus over line at least. Probably a winning rook ending, I would think. Yep. Okay. But he played h4, instead. Let me go back. Sorry. h4 to prepare to play h5 in a moment. h6, g4, queen c8. Seeking salvation in a queen exchange. That would be left with a positional advantage due to the awkward black knight on h7, but the game is far from over, says Murray. Should I say MC? Maybe I should. Just make it clear that that's Murray's comment. Very good comments by Murray, actually. Okay, so he won. They played some moves, and it's unpleasant, very unpleasant for black. The knight is terrible on h7, but the game does continue. And they played some more moves. King c2 is very useful. If you go rook g4, you want to be able to go h5, rook f4 without bishop h6 happening. It's one reason he did that. They played some more moves. b4, b1. White's got the initiative, and he's got a pawn to attack on c5. Rook b2. Rook to the 7th, check, and then bishop b2 is not a move, is something engines point out. Rook e8, king a b1. Well, you can take and play bishop b5, but basically you're losing against such good rooks. So you try. I mean, let's just do it. I suppose. So presumably rook e7. Check. No, you don't check. Sorry, don't go check. You just go take. Overwrite. Take here, and you should win. Basically, rooks are much better than knights in endings. And here you're winning the sepal. And this is plus minus. We'll give it a plus minus. Okay. So that was very clever. But in fact he didn't see that. They played some more moves. Now he went rook to the 7th, check, king to there, rook back, and now he has e6. Because the bishop is in g7, of course if bishop takes bishop, rook takes pawn with check, and rook g8 check, and rook takes knight mate. So he took, and Kasparov got to take some pieces. And I said a very fine game by Kasparov, which he made a difficult decision, f takes e3 in the opening, prioritizing with an S because I'm English, rather than American initiative over structure. Played the nice thematic sacrifice, knight takes g7, had to exchange queens but still retained a fierce initiative, and eventually smashed his way through. Very nice game. The second game is this fantastic game with Topalov and Vaikanze. This has got notes by Igor Stoll. And Igor was basing his notes on his fellow Slovakian. They're certainly not Czech. They're Slovaks. Sorry. Igor Stoll. Ljubomir Fatachnik. And Igor used the Czech Vlastimil Jansa as his guide for ideas in the pits. And I've said my guru is Colin McNabb, just as to what you should play in the opening. Because the pits is quite a singular opening, and you know, navigating your way through is quite tough. I once wrote a book on those openings, and basically my research involved losing in every possible line of the pits, modern complex. And then later I did beat David Norwood in one of them, at least. I got something back, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't like writing a book on the Latvian Gambit, where I knew it was, well, dubious at best, but just I found them rather hard. Anyway, e4, d6. So Topalov's normally a c5 player, but he played d6 here. He maybe expected f3 and f3, g6, c4 with his Amish, but Kasparov went knight c3. Bishop g7 is slightly odd. c6 is more normal, basically, because if white's going to go queen d2 and bishop h6, you gain your tempo by leaving the bishop on f8. So McNabb and Jansa both prefer to play c6 here, and I gave a fairly random game. Igor said what about h3? I gave a very random game where Colin won. I mean, he's obviously not winning at all at this stage, but in the end he beat Josh Waitzkin, I think, in some tournament. Okay, it was fairly random. I just wanted to show my guru in action. Queen d2, c6. They played moves. I mean, every move is difficult because you have to make decisions. So here, if e5, you'd have knight b4, if necessary. Probably you would play e5, knight b4, I think. e5, b4, exclam. Okay. Right, so they played some moves and got a position, and Topalov managed to stabilise things more or less. Black's not doing badly here at all positionally, but he has got a slight weakness in a5, and he decided he'd taken d4 now. I don't know if he has to. If he goes c5, d5, he's worse. He's lacking in space. But I don't know if he could go king a8 and bishop a8 or something. King b8 and bishop a8. He took anyway. Kasparov took with a knight. With a rook. In fact, I think a knight takes c5, knight b3 would actually come to the same thing as happened. I don't know if rook d2 is particularly a move, but he didn't do it. And really, I don't care that much for the moment. g3 is interesting. Tactic over this next slam, though engines aren't convinced. Really, the point of this game is not the opening, where Topalov did rather well, in fact. He gets in d5. Unless he gets splatted now, he's doing well, which is why, at this stage, he started hacking. Engines prefer knight a2 now and say it's equal, but it's very equal for black, quite comfortable, probably. And Kasparov started to hack in a magnificent way. Have to take this knight, queen d6. Another magnificent move, rook takes d4. And actually it turns out that king b6 would be pretty good for black in this position. Which is not very obvious. King b6. Sorry, let's go back. Let's go to king b6, b4, queen takes, rook takes, knight takes, takes. And black's at least equal, probably slightly better. Anyway, luckily for us, Topalov played c takes and all hell broke loose. Starting with the splendid rook e7 check. Can't take it because the queen takes d4 to b6. Does it? Queen takes d4. We ought to give this line, I suppose, a little bit more of it. King to there, queen to there, bishop to there, knight to there, queen to there, checkmate. And so he went up, takes, had to take the knight. I think if queen c5, there's something, is there? Queen takes, king takes, sorry, queen takes f6, queen to there, and then the great move, bishop e6. It gives white a tempo, and that is very, very good for him. Bishop takes d5, b4. What happens to king takes this? Presumably b4 check. Oh, just b4 check, of course. Sorry, because there you controlled c5, being stupid. So they got to this position, and it turns out here that in fact rook a7 is the best move, I believe, which I think Kavlet later found. Rook a7, bishop b7 takes, queen takes pawn, rook b6 it slam, rook a8, queen takes knight, a5, bishop f1, and basically he's winning. ab4, rook checks is mate, and otherwise you're going queen c3 or something to threaten both queen, bishop b5 check followed by queen b3, and black basically can't defend himself, which is rather splendid. I mean, for us, it's not very splendid for Topalov, of course. I don't know if you can go rook a b8 here. What happens? Does this bishop takes b5 happen? Rook a b8, h b8, queen c3. How's this working? Oh, right, queen c3, rook takes rook, king b2, exclam. And there's no defence. Exclaim. Lovely. But in fact he went queen c3. Queen takes d5. Bishop takes d5, king b2, and the threat of queen b3 check, I should say. Rook a7, threatening mate. Bishop b7 is the only move. Rook takes. And now it gets quite complicated. Black has time to counterattack. Queen c4 was a mistake, and I mean it's really so difficult, this position, that I mean what you do, there's not very much you can do about this, is there? I mean he should have gone rook h8, rook b6, rook a8, bishop f1 is a great move, threatening rook d6 apparently. And apparently this just wins. Rook e c8, queen takes c8. Queen checks. King to here. E5 check. Bishop c4 exclam. Says the engine, I don't know. Queen takes, if pawn takes. I'm just following engine lines. If pawn takes, new variation. Rook takes, king b5, queen takes a8. And there's no discovered check because the queen's on prise. Queen b takes. Queen takes c4. I mean, this is what happens with an engine. Take, 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 with a winning advantage. Fairly easy, I suppose. Equals plus minus. Another line. Queen c4. So rook here, rook there, bishop f1. Rook e c8 takes, and this line. It's a great move, and he should win. I mean, it's not trivial, but it should be winning. Okay, but he went queen c4, takes, so now the material balance is getting better. King a3. Now white wins by force. In a really difficult position, Topalov made the wrong choice. After rook d1 check, king b2, rook a8, queen b6, queen checks, takes, takes, takes. Then white ought to win, but it's not trivial. a5, bishop b6. b4, check here, check. Now if rook takes, if you don't play rook takes, basically you're keeping your pawns. c3 traps the rook and white should win. Okay. You know, there are various endings. But he went king a3 here, which was a mistake, and now it all happens with check. Well done, you have to play check. I mean, you've got no choice. It's not a position you can do anything but give check, because you're being attacked as well. And luckily it all works. Would have been a shame if it hadn't really. Great attack. King to there, forced. Bishop f1 exclam. Lovely move. Stops queen d3 check. Queen takes. d2. I suppose I should say queen. Wait a minute. I don't want d2 if queen takes. Check. Here, check. I suppose I ought to mention rook d7. Oh, I don't want bishop c4. Let's delete. That got put in by mistake. Okay, sorry. Delete variation. There we go. Let's go Control R. I haven't deleted anything, have I? Deleted anything serious? And then Rook D2, and then finally the final blow, Rook D7. Another great move. The only move. I mean, there is really blow met blow. It's really great, actually, this game. Fantastic game. Well done to both of them for fighting so hard. And there's nothing to be done. You have to take the queen. And you've won this. And still it's not that trivial because of the c-pawn. You want Rook D3. He could also have played check here and here, but after queen to here, unfortunately the move you want to play, which is c3, just loses to queen e4 check. So, and now Kasparov had to be careful. It's a good move, and he managed to get control. f4. I guess he could have gone king c2 as well, presumably. That would certainly have been good enough. He's just trying to keep all his boys. And dart here. That also protects the h2 pawn, by the way. And so, because rook takes pawn, queen g1 check. And so, seeing he was basically completely lost, Topalov resigned. So, a fantastic game by Kasparov. Really fantastic game. And I've pointed out the kaleidoscope of diagrams shows how, after a slightly difficult opening, Kasparov opened fire with a cascade of volleys which drove the Black King from his residence, his fortress, from his relatively safe fortress on a7 to his doom in the wilds near d1. Fantastic game. So people, I hope you've enjoyed these two great games, and please keep on sending in suggestions of games by great players, people you think are the best player of all time. If anybody knows about the cocktails, then I'd be really delighted to know. And I'll see you in a fortnight, presumably on the 16th. Sorry, today's the 2nd. I'm writing on the 2nd, so on the 18th, in fact, of July. Cheers.